Pressure grows for Democrats to find an alternative to Joe Biden, and one Texas congressman is turning up the heat.
I just want to find the strongest candidate for us in November, and I don't think we have that now.
But there's conflict within the caucus.
Do I think that it was his best performance? Absolutely not. Do I think that the substance was there? I absolutely do.
We look closer at the case for and against change at the party convention and what could happen next. Two vastly different candidates running to represent you in the U.S. Senate. We go beyond the sound bites to learn more about them away from the noise of the campaign trail. Concern about growing demand on the Texas power grid fuels calls for more funding. But is the outlook accurate?
The high top-end numbers that are being tossed out need to be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt.
The new call to action and how it could shape the future of the grid.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. The story dominating news this week is the political future of Joe Biden. His poor performance in the presidential debate fueled calls to end his re-election campaign from people in his own party, and one Texan pushed the pressure to a higher level. On Tuesday, Texas Congressman Lloyd Doggett became the first Democrat in Congress to call for Biden to drop out of the race. The 77-year-old congressman urged the president to make way for a new generation of leaders. Doggett said his message to Biden is less about his age and more about his ability to win the election. The congressman spoke with our Monica Madden after his announcement and laid out what he thinks needs to happen now.
Congressman Lloyd Doggett, thank you so much for joining us. You, of course, made a lot of news earlier by announcing that you really thought that President Joe Biden should withdraw himself from the race. I'm curious, first and foremost, did you talk to the White House about this before making that announcement?
I left a message for them. They did not respond. I think my views are well known to them, and I notified our Democratic leadership also. I did this thoughtfully, but sadly. I wish this didn't have to be done, but I'm really very, very concerned that our country is about to be taken over by a criminal and his gang. The danger is great to our democracy, and I don't believe that President Biden is our strongest candidate to put a stop to this. And it's because of the risk of the harm that could be done to our country and our families that I felt it was essential to speak up.
How long have you been stewing over this? Of course, we started to hear a lot more concerns about the president's ability to defeat Trump in November after the first debate. But has this been something that has been of concern to you for a longer period?
It has been, and if I have any regret, it is not having spoken up earlier about this. All of us were concerned that anything we might say would make it more difficult for the president. But Libby and I watched that debate together, and we were alarmed. We thought the debate would give us the momentum to begin a comeback to try to overcome the bad poll numbers that have been out there. Instead, we were alarmed at what wasn't said as well as what was mumbled through the debate. And the next morning, I went to the floor of the House in Washington and spoke to our leadership and to as many colleagues as I could to say, we have to have another choice. No doubt this will create a chaotic atmosphere for Democrats leading up to the convention in Chicago, which I plan to attend. But I think if it's a fair and open process and doesn't look like the smoke-filled rooms of the past with power brokers picking the candidate, and we've got a number of good potential candidates, governors, senators, perhaps the vice president, who all can compete openly and fairly, and then get about the business of uniting behind them to provide a reasonable alternative to President Trump.
Who's your pick?
I don't have one at this point. I can say for sure that I'm not acting on behalf of any other candidate. I just want to find the strongest candidate for us in November, and I don't think we have that now, but we have to work respectfully to try to achieve that. It's going to be uphill, underdog kind of battle. But if we have a fair and open process, I think many of those people, some of them even called the double haters who didn't like their choices between Biden and Trump, we give them another alternative. Those numbers will be lower because a governor like Governor Whitmer, for example, is not that well known outside her state. As people would see her or one of the other governors or senators outline their approach, I think the numbers will get very close. I think we have to work together to try to use the weeks that we have left to have a good open process and then unite behind our candidate. And I think we can find the right candidate there. That's the way it worked 100 years ago, but now it can work to resolve the problem that we have.
Of course, you know, there have been a lot of conversations around age in this with both of the elected officials, you not being too far behind them in age, of course. Is this about age?
Well, it's a factor. You know, no, I'm not a youngster in this. In fact, one of the reasons that I'm able to speak out about this is that I'm not starting my career and concerned about what an impact this might have. I can be concerned solely about what I think is best for our country. It's a factor to consider. I don't believe there's an age that is too much or too little. I'm more concerned about what I saw and what the American people have seen in recent months, and the fact that many people just don't have confidence in this president that we need to have in order to stop Trump.
All right, Congressman Doggett, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Doggett said several Democrats in Congress reached out to him, voicing similar concerns about the campaign, but others stepped up to support the president. Dallas Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett spoke during a news conference Wednesday and backed Biden's re-election bid.
I think I've been pretty clear. I stand with the president. I don't think that he should stand down. Literally, we're here because we're handing out money. This administration has done so much, and he has a record to run on. So this idea that we will minimize the president's 90-minute performance and say that we need to turn our backs on him when we know that he has over 50 years of a record that he is running on. And when we talk about running on a record as president, he has done literally unprecedented things in a good way for this country. I know that people are still struggling. I know that there is more to do, and that's exactly why he's running for re-election, because it's about finishing the job. I just don't think that it's fair that we say that our president, who we know was born with a stutter, and we know that there is no surgery that can fix a stutter, you're given ways to kind of work around it, but as he's getting older, it is more difficult for him to work around those things, in addition to the fact that he wasn't sitting inside of a courtroom being prosecuted for 34 felonies. Instead, he was out on the road, and so as he began to speak, you could hear that he was hoarse. So we're talking about somebody who has been working not only behind the scenes, but he has been working in the streets. So do I think that it makes sense for people to bail on him? Absolutely not. Do I think that it was his best performance? Absolutely not. Do I think that the substance was there? I absolutely do.
Texas Republicans have a much different take. Some state leaders said Biden's poor debate performance proved criticism that many Republicans previously voiced about his abilities. Texas Republican Party Chairman Abraham George posted on social media after the debate, writing, "Biden is not up to the task of being president. President Trump continued to be sharp and show the strength, leadership, and grit that Americans want. The contrast could not be any more clear." Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick said he does not expect Biden to continue his campaign much longer. In an appearance on Newsmax, he told host Chris Salcedo that Biden would lose big time if he's on the ballot. Patrick said, quote, "I still don't think he is going to be on the ballot, and I think the list to replace him is abysmal." With 4 months to go before Election Day, the campaign for U.S. Senate is ramping up. We sit down with the candidates away from the campaign trail, digging deeper into the contrasts with different visions for how to represent you in Washington.
It would have been stupid for me not to have looked into this as a solution for the city of Austin. I mean, I've always been dedicated to public safety.
Just ahead, an update to our investigation into hospital crashes and the safety barriers experts say could prevent disaster. I'm Investigator Matt Grant with the latest on a local resolution now filed following a fatal crash at an Austin hospital that could be the catalyst for more change in Texas and beyond. That's coming up. Today, an update to our investigation as local policymakers keep their promise, taking action to make medical facilities safer and prevent disaster. This resolution, now officially filed, aims to require all Austin hospitals build in the future to have security barriers called bollards at ER entrances. Austin City Council member Mackenzie Kelly introduced a proposal specifically mentioning our ongoing investigation, which continues to track vehicles crashing into medical centers all across the country over the past decade. More than 340 in data we've compiled to this point. This potential policy change comes just months after a drunk driver crashed into the ER waiting room at St. David's North Austin Medical Center, injuring 5 and leaving the driver dead. The Bernard family, who spoke exclusively with our team, tells us now through their attorney they will speak in support of Kelly's resolution at a council meeting in a few weeks, when the measure should also get a vote.
It warms my heart that they're touched that we're doing this. Unfortunately, sometimes in life it takes a sort of tragedy to enact change, but my hope is that this never happens again.
And are you optimistic that this will pass?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
The resolution also tasks the city manager with exploring ways to get existing hospitals to also install bollards through incentives or requiring it anytime a hospital applies for a permit to expand, for example. Kelly tells us the measure already has 5 of 6 votes needed to pass. Also off camera this week, we watched St. David's surveillance video from the moment of the crash, shown to us by a source who says Austin police released it to them. The footage shows the car driving fast into the waiting room aquarium, where all 4 members of the Bernard family were standing when hit. That scene detailed in the family's $1 million lawsuit against St. David's for not having bollards at the time. The hospital's installed a dozen since the crash and after our investigation. We've also just learned the 5th person injured in the incident has joined the family's lawsuit. St. David's previously said it does not comment on matters related to litigation. We'll keep you updated on these developments and policy changes proposed in other places after our reporting. Catch up now in this story online. Matt Grant, State of Texas.
Thanks, Matt. Demand on the Texas power grid sparks new calls to action. What the state's top leaders are calling for now, and why that could put more money toward plans for new power plants. Plus, digging deeper to find the motivation behind the men running to represent you in the U.S. Senate.
Remember, it's not about you. It's about them. It's about their families. It's about their kids. It's about their future. It's about their dreams.
We sit down with the candidates away from the campaign trail to learn more about their distinct differences and some common ground.
We're all Americans. We're all Texans. We have some really common values that we share. Let's get back to some of those.
An in-depth look at the ideas that inspire the candidates seeking to serve Texans in Washington. We are just 4 months out from the general election, and the campaign for U.S. Senate is ramping up. Congressman Colin Allred is challenging incumbent Senator Ted Cruz. They're vastly different candidates with different visions for how to represent you. Our Daniel Marin recently spent an afternoon with each candidate away from the noise and rhetoric of the campaign trail. It's part of a 1-hour special on the Senate race. The goal, to learn things you won't hear in a political ad or a quick soundbite. Here's a sample of those in-depth conversations.
We just have a couple more minutes. My question is, do you lead more with emotion, or do you like to think things through? What's your style?
Yeah, well, I think I've become, pretty well known for keeping my cool and for always being one of the calmer people, even when everything is going to heck all around me. I think I developed that in my NFL career, where the idea was to perform. Losing your head's not going to help, right? And I think that's also true when it comes to legislation or responding to the issues of the day. That kind of snap judgment that you might make in the first moment is not always, to me, the one that's wisest and most prudent. If you think things through and also put yourself in the shoes of someone who you might disagree with, you can sometimes find yourself understanding, well, maybe this is more gray than black and white. And I'm somebody who's comfortable with that. When I see Ted Cruz, I see somebody who I think sees everything in such stark terms. That it's either black or it's white, and he's always going to be fighting it. And to me, that's not my experience of life, and I don't think it is most Texans either. That often things are very complicated, and that smart people are often working hard to try and solve them. And that well-meaning people are out there who want to be consulted with. There are well-meaning folks, some of the folks I love the most in the world disagree with me, on restoring a woman's right to choose here in Texas. I understand that. I'm a Christian. I went to Baylor. I'm a church-going man. I get it, okay? But I also understand that we need to have a more fulsome conversation about how we can both protect life, consistent, I think, also with protecting individual rights, right? To me, that's the kind of thing where you have to have leaders in place who want to take that approach. But I do think that becoming a father and having 2 young children has fundamentally changed me in the way that every parent, I think, can say the same, because it has extended my view into the future so much more in terms of my concern about their future and what country and what state they're going to inherit. And I want to make sure that they have the opportunities, of course, that I had, but also that they inherit a state and a country that's not just destroyed by divisions and that's not at each other's throats, but one that does have, yes, important differences at times, but that fundamentally understands, I think as John Lewis used to tell us, that we might have come here on different ships, but we're in the same boat now. We're all Americans, we're all Texans. We have some really common values that we share. Let's get back to some of those.
Okay, Congressman, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, appreciate it.
I've said a lot of times the difference between Republicans and Democrats, that Republicans' office, I think Republicans are terrible communicators. And that they communicate with their left brain, they communicate with logic. And so you get Republicans that get up and they put a green eye shade on, and they put up a pie chart and they say, if you look at the long-term actuarial soundness of the Social Security system, and listen, for those of us who care about numbers and facts, you can hear an argument and say, yeah, we need to do something to protect and save Social Security. That's persuasive. But a lot of people don't think that way. And Democrats, Republicans try to appeal to your brain. Democrats typically go for your heart. And so Democrats will just say, he wants to eat your children. And by the way, the heart is much more effective than the brain. If you were to pick one, there's no doubt the heart is more effective. What I think is most effective is to use both. Is to appeal to reason and logic and explain, but explain it in a way that it matters to you and your family. The best political advice I ever got in my life was early on, right when I was first running for office. I was getting ready to give a campaign speech somewhere. And Heidi told me, Ted, she said, remember, it's not about you. It's about them. It's about their families. It's about their kids. It's about their future. It's about their dreams. And you get so many political candidates, politicians that jump on stage, and the only word out of their mouth is I. That's something to this day, before I talk to any group, I try to remember that it's not about you, it's about them. And if you can talk about what they care about, if you can make it relevant to their life, that's powerful. And so, I think we need more real conversations.
You can see more of our real conversations with the candidates. We put together a 1-hour special presentation, Campaign Context, the Race for Senate, will air Wednesday at 7 p.m. on most Nexstar stations across Texas. Check your local listings for details.
So it's a really significant impact, and we really need to think about how we're responsive to that.
Demand on the Texas power grid is rising faster than previously expected. We look at why a lot of the blame is falling on 2 growing businesses. As the temperatures rise, so is the demand on the Texas power grid. Now the state's top leadership is calling for an immediate review of all policies related to the grid. It comes amid growing concern about strain on the system. And as Avery Travis explains, state leaders want new incentives to build more power plants.
Sweet relief from the Texas heat.
Very pretty sunny day for us.
Visitors from all over getting a taste of our summer weather.
Well, it's humid, so you have a lot of moisture here, which we don't have in California.
Inside the Capitol walls, it's heating up too, with ERCOT CEO Pablo Vegas telling lawmakers the state may nearly double the amount of power needed for the grid by 2030.
So it's a really significant impact, and we really need to think about how we're responsive to that.
In response, Governor Greg Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick announced efforts to double the size of the Texas Energy Fund. The $5 billion program, approved by voters last November, offers low-interest loans to primarily natural gas companies to build more power plants. The state saw sky-high interest in the program, potential applications that would add up to $39 billion from the state.
Abbott and Patrick want to expand the program to $10 billion and said, quote, "We need to move quickly."
The high top-end numbers that are being tossed out need to be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt.
University of Texas energy expert Joshua Rhodes says it would take every potential data center, green hydrogen facility, and crypto mine that wanted to connect to do so to hit ERCOT's latest estimates.
But that would be growth on a scale that we've never seen before.
He says the warning bells and response are really proactive steps.
The idea is that if we are planning for larger amounts of load, then we'll be more proactive in doing things like building transmission and other supporting infrastructure to be able to meet it.
Avery Travis for State of Texas.
At last month's hearing, ERCOT CEO Pablo Vegas told lawmakers that the state will need nearly double the power generation Texas has right now. He said a big part of the demand comes from cryptocurrency miners and artificial intelligence data centers. Vegas said just one processor used for AI consumes enough energy to power a Texas home for a year. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick called for more scrutiny of crypto mines and data centers. He called them niche industries that have massive power demands and produce very few jobs. Lieutenant Governor alluded to possible regulations or limits for those industries. Patrick said the state should prioritize energy needs of homeowners. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle, and we'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.